It began with a whisper from Brussels, a leak so small it could have been ignored. But inside was an economic bombshell. Behind closed doors, Donald Trump had pressed NATO allies, raised tariffs on Africa's vital exports, oil and gold. His message was clear: bend Africa or watch it starve. For Africa, this was no negotiation. It was economic warfare disguised as diplomacy. But in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré refused to bow. He called it what it was and prepared to fight back. The leak itself came from inside the very meeting. One European official, unable to silence his conscience, slipped the memo to a journalist. Within hours, headlines spread: Europe targets Africa's oil and gold. On social media, young Africans asked the same question: how long will others dictate our future? Traoré wasted no time. At dawn, he gathered his advisors. This is not about tariffs, he said. It's about control. If we bow today, we'll be slaves tomorrow. Within days, leaders from Mali, Guinea, and across the Sahel met in a secret summit. For decades, they had seen their resources drained while their people remained poor. Now the tone shifted. No more begging for aid. Instead, unity. If the West imposes tariffs, Africa will cut off oil and gold entirely and find new partners. The risk was immense, but one by one, the leaders agreed. On the streets, pride overcame fear. A student held a sign: better to endure hunger for a year than slavery for a century. Crowds roared in agreement. Europe's markets panicked. Gold prices spiked. Energy officials admitted their dependence on Niger's uranium, and auto executives feared collapse without Africa's cobalt. For the first time in decades, Europe realized it needed Africa more than Africa needed Europe. But the West struck back. Banks froze African accounts, ports delayed shipments, cyber attacks targeted government systems, and media campaigns painted Traoré as reckless. Shortages did hit ordinary people. But instead of breaking, communities stood together. Volunteers shared food, students formed networks, and local banks built gold-backed payment systems to bypass Western control. And then Africa spoke with one voice. On television, Traoré stood not with generals, but with miners, farmers, and engineers. They say we are reckless, he declared. I say we are free. Oil and gold belong to Africa and will flow only with dignity. His words electrified the continent. From Lagos to Kinshasa, murals and rallies carried one message: if Traoré stands, we stand. Globally, BRICS nations move fast. China offered credit, Russia proposed joint ventures, India pledged long-term crude deals. Africa was no longer alone. Then came the final blow. Another leak exposed secret contracts, proving Western corporations planned to privatize Africa's oil and gold for decades to come. It was never about tariffs. It was about theft. Outrage swept across Africa. Leaders launched investigations, protesters filled streets, and diaspora communities in Paris and New York demanded transparency. What began as whispers in Brussels had transformed into a continental awakening. Africa's resources were no longer symbols of plunder. They had become weapons of dignity. At the closing session of the Sahel Summit, Traoré's voice carried across nations. They thought hunger would silence us. Instead, it awakened us. From this day forward, Africa is not a marketplace. They will meet us as equals, or not at all. And with those words, the chapter turned. What was meant to break Africa instead forged its unity.